Most non-local hunters start their adventure in Kotzebue, Alaska. This village hub has a small airport facility that's crowded during peak seasons. Just getting your bags and dodging the chaos is enough to stress you out. The situation can be frustrating for you and for local residents. Here's a few ways to ease the tension. Mail your non-essentials to your air transporter a few weeks early to avoid the bulk coming off the plane. And be patient and courteous. Anticipate this chaos and help yourself and others ease through this first hurdle. And don't wear camo. It draws attention and you don't want that. I had no choice on this trip because my hunting partner wears her camo year-round.
Come here. Sarah. Good girl, come here. Come here. Sit. Sit. You ready to go for a ride? You ready to jump in the bush plane? Just landed. You saw the chaos in the airport. Chachi's ready. Got our gear packed up. And we're going to jump on the plane and try to go find some caribou. Headed northeast into Unit 23 and give it a go for caribou this year. It's August 7th, 7:30 at night. My traveling companion on this hunt is Chachi. And that's my gear.
Here's a map of the region for Game Management Unit 23. All that blue and green ink highlights federal lands, which are all close to hunting caribou this year. During early to mid-August, caribou are fairly elusive in Game Management Unit 23, except on rare events where the northern boundary sees an early surge of migration activity. But even then, access is limited because those northern Noatak tributaries are only occasionally floatable during August, especially when you factor in heavier meat loads. Even still, I was hoping to find a few huntable groups somewhere on a river within Game Management Unit 23, despite the closure. And I'll explain how this is legal when we land a plane. Chachi and I have explored much of Alaska together, and one of her favorite getaways to the backcountry is in northwest Alaska. She knows this plane, and no doubt, she knows we're headed to somewhere very freaking cool. The landscapes of the Kobuk Valley National Park and the Noatak National Preserve are some of the sweetest gemstones of public land opportunity. The rivers are wild and scenic. The tundra, so expansive, you could fall asleep traveling at speeds of 100 miles an hour, only to wake up an hour later and see what appears to be the same terrain. Wide open, rolling hills and undulating tundra, covering tens of millions of undeveloped Arctic acreage. The rivers are green with algae and gin clear, and the fishing, unreal at times. Obviously the hunting is why we're seeing it this trip, but we had been flying for 2.5 hours and haven't seen a single caribou. We scouted the entire northern boundary of Game Management Unit 23 from west to east, and then flew into Game Management Unit 26A. It wasn't until we reached the area around Howard Pass that caribou trails were clearly being used most frequently. And truthfully, I was thankful not to have seen any caribou in Game Management Unit 23 because all the major tributaries of the Noatak were just too low to float, and we scouted them all. Choosing a route to float wasn't that difficult because really, there was only one option. We had seen a few scattered groups of caribou within 10 miles of the river, and it was floatable, and the weather was degrading, and we were low on fuel. So I took it. I got dropped off in Game Management Unit 26A, about 10 miles north of Game Management Unit 23. There were no hunting restrictions, and the bag limit was 5 caribou per day. According to local belief, I represent the groups who gain access to the frontal migration, divert the herd by airplane and hunting activities, thereby scattering the herd and stalling the migration. So I checked my watch to see when these nervous caribou would present themselves. I landed at 10:30 p.m. The plane left the area at 10:40 p.m. Here's some food for thought. The average cost of a bush plane is a whopping $4 for every mile the plane flies for you. We've been flying for 3 hours at nearly 100 miles an hour, and the plane still has to fly back to base. This was going to be an expensive rack of meat. So here's the deal with legally navigating this federal lands closure. This river courses through federal land, which is federal jurisdiction. But all exposed land services that extends to the mean high water mark is owned by the state. So I can legally land a plane and hunt caribou in Game Management Unit 23 on federal lands, as long as those activities occur above the water and below the mean high water mark. And since 90% of my caribou harvests have occurred on such gravel bars, I'm prepared to take that risk. Luckily on this trip, I don't have to. Google WSA 16-03 for more facts on the high water mark issue. This will give an explanation of the state's perspective on hunting below mean high water mark. For this hunt, I brought a 3-season Mountain Hardware 2-person dome tent for shelter and a 2-inch inflatable mattress for my old bones. I used a jet boil for boiling water for food and coffee, as well as water purification if needed. I packed 35 pounds of food for a 14-day field stay. That's 2.5 pounds of food weight consumed each day, which provides an average daily caloric value of around 3,000 calories. I'll end up losing 4 pounds in 11 days. So that's my number one motivator to hunt for food. It was 11:30 and I've taken reprieve inside the tent. The wind has calmed down and the bugs are pretty bad. That rain is threatening to come in over the hills about 4 or 5 miles from here, but there's no wind to push it, so it's sort of just stagnant in one location. Chachi's not ready to come in yet. She's going to be on guard. At this point, the plane had been gone for 1 hour and 10 minutes. So it's midnight. We have finally started seeing some caribou come through. And it was business as usual for these caribou. These animals were completely unaffected by the plane activity in my presence. It's midnight and temperature is 52 degrees. I documented ambient temperatures every 8 hours to help make predictions about insects, caribou movements, as well as my own comfort and survival. Gaining a strong working knowledge of temperature ranges and how to apply it in your environment will make you a better hunter, and this project will serve you well. All living things have a comfortable temperature range of operation. That's true for mosquitoes, gnats, blowflies, big and small game animals, people, the tundra, permafrost, even dogs. Temperature rules this environment. It's pretty foggy this morning. 8 a.m. and 51 degrees. Less than half-mile visibility, but cool, so I would imagine caribou are moving around a little bit. Nice breeze out of the south. Morning of August 8th, nice and foggy this morning, and starting to rain. Just gonna wait it out. Every few hours a sucker hole would give us about a half an hour of time to explore the area. And Chachi was quite pleased with the berry crop this year. But she was a lot more interested in a meatier snack. Don't be looking at those caribou. I know you see them. The average temperature on August 8th was 49 degrees Fahrenheit, and caribou were active all day. Got another small group of what look like cows, some calves moving through. It's important that we don't disturb those groups to make sure they ensure the safe trail networks without any funky smells or disturbances in their path. But it is nice to see them
around and moving this way. Stay.
I wanted to place Chachi closer to these caribou so that she becomes familiar with my posture and energy. That's my personal connection with her, and she's a wonderful partner.
She reminds me to pay attention.
I had no intentions of killing this first bull. Personally, I believe it's a steward's rite of passage to let at least 20 bulls go by before he takes his one. Here's a quick backcountry tip on judging wind speed. My chamois is horizontal to the ground in wind speeds of 15 miles per hour. It forms a 45-degree angle to the ground at 7 miles per hour. Today's wind speed was approximately 10 to 12 miles an hour with 15-mile-an-hour gusts. On the high bank across from camp, the first confirmation of warming effects. This thaw fracture was 1/4 of a mile long and several feet deep. In less than 10 years, this river will be 12 foot wider in this spot. Gaining a good vantage of this bull gives me confidence about the prospects of having meat in camp eventually. The weather and time of day were certainly deciding factors about not pulling the trigger on this bull, but the main reason is this was only the third bull I'd seen. But these encounters did teach me that these caribou aren't deterred by wind, and they remain active when temperatures are cooler than 60 degrees. Satisfied with our sneak, we returned to gorge on those berries. I imagine the local predators find these calories easier than chasing caribou. But the coolest part of day 2 was browsing our way right into this ancient fire ring.
It's old and small, 15 inches across. In the middle of this bench, supported by bones. Caribou scapula. Not related probably to this site, but it's interesting that they made that fire so far from the river and the willow line.
This entire region has a well-documented archaeological history of paleo-ancestral habitation. These people knew how to hunt and knew how to survive in total isolation. This river corridor has been hunted by man as far back as 12,000 years. Google the Bering Land Bridge, paleo complexes in Alaska, or the Mesa site for good information. So initially, I misinterpreted the evidence here and discounted the caribou bones littering this site. However, this partial rib bone should have opened my eyes a bit, because this bone tells me a lot. First, it was chiseled by teeth after being cooked on this fire. The moss depth and degradation of bone tissue suggests it has sat here for hundreds of years. The last person to leave this site placed a little thank you on top of a bed of cooling coals. The other bones around the site could have been left after deboning to shed weight for transporting. This hunter knew his way around a primitive fire. He placed a rock to the side as a tinder platform and a stable foundation to establish his flame. He built this fire small and efficient to manage his fuel source, and no doubt his efforts to collect that fuel would have been exhausting in this scarce landscape. This is direct evidence to me that man and caribou have successfully coexisted here at this site for more than 10,000 years. That's a special rite of passage that I hope to gift my children. I want to know more about these people.
Sometimes you find things that you think you find, they turn out to be nothing other than a natural phenomenon. And sometimes you find things that you think you find, dismiss them, they turned out to be something legit.
Well, it's about 7:45 a.m. and temperature's still about 47 degrees. Got a 7 to 9 mile an hour wind out there. Light rain. No caribou moving around at the moment. It's a little brisk out there to be starting to float, so we're just going to wait it out a couple of hours and see if the weather lifts up a little once it warms up above the cloud layer. It's about 10 a.m. on day 3 and still tent bound. No caribou moving around at the moment. It's still raining and windy and coming from the north. So patience is one of those things, being a backcountry hunter, that it just comes as part of the game. Out here we're at the mercy of weather and the animal movements, nothing else. So it's just a waiting game. Chachi doesn't mind. She's got a warm tent to hang out in. Got a sleeping bag, plenty of food, good book, and boredom. The temperature had fallen 10 degrees in 12 hours. So, like the caribou, we bed down and rode it out. Well, I'm pretty disappointed in myself. I brought this Goal Zero battery pack that's rechargeable. And no telling how long it's been activated, but the power button was on inside one of my bags and it used 40% of the charged battery life. That means that that's going to put a hurting on my recharge capacity with video cameras and that tablet I brought to read. Not the best idea with no sun to recharge this unit. It is what it is. When it's done, no more charging. So that means sat phone batteries, camera battery, GoPro battery, and my tablet, as well as my personal phone. With 60% left in that thing, it's probably a moot item in the next 4 or 5 days. And I won't need full charge on things until probably day 10. So that, my friend, you have to be careful with. These buttons are just too easy to push. Well, it's the coldest morning yet so far. Woke up 42 degrees and lots of fog. Give it a couple of hours to burn off. I think it'll be fine. The ceiling's pretty low. It's probably 500 feet. Not much moving around out there, but lots of fog. No rain. That stopped about 6 hours ago. So let's hope for the best, because this is day 4. And Chachi and I are sick of sitting in this tent. We got to get out and stretch our muscles and our backs. Mine's getting pretty stiff. Time to eat a quick breakfast. A bagel. Surprise, surprise. And coffee. Got to do it. Called cat hole. Dig it at least a foot down. You do your business and cover it up. I noted the time of day this plane flew over and was curious to know when I'd see another group of caribou. But I decided to kill some time meanwhile by building my own warming fire. In order to make a good warming fire in the Arctic, you got to think small, efficient, practical. Looks like people have been using this site for quite a while. Now the premise behind that is to establish a small area to build your fire as a platform, and then you want rocks to deflect it, the heat back into a small area of containment. They don't have to be, this needs not be a large fire at all. And a lot of prep work has to go in before you can even establish a fire. I prefer to collect at least an hour's worth of wood, and that's about how long it'll take to burn to ash all of my trash and toilet paper. Here I've got a lot of steel wool, 4/0 steel wool. You can find this at any hardware store, and it comes in little layers that's all rolled, and you don't need a whole lot. All you need this steel wool for is to accept a spark, and it will travel through these fibers like nobody's business. It's the fastest way to establish a spark and a small flame for any fire, and especially in the Arctic, because this stuff will spark even when it's wet. So you use this sparingly. And the next nugget that I bring from home is at least 4 to 6 ounces of birch bark, and this is another source that can be used as tinder and fuel source. Help get your mature flame started from scratch. Small pieces is all you really need. I found this charred wood nearby and scored. Charcoal is much like a lantern mantle. Just a little flame and the charcoal readily distributes the energy. Give it plenty of oxygen. Let that birch bark start. Once you got it maturely flamed out, you can put on your small tinder. Okay, it's been about 40 minutes since the plane flew over, and again, business as usual for these caribou. And my campfire smoke hasn't bothered them one bit. Those rocks are too hot to touch. And you also have rocks underneath there as a platform where they're super hot. This fire that you saw, all of that fuel, lasted 54 minutes. And it successfully burned 3 days of trash. I'm going to let that finish up, but I can't help but think that the hunter who built that small warming fire above mean high water over there was a very efficient and practical hunter. And he used these rocks to his advantage. These rocks will stay warm for several hours, especially if you buried them slightly in dirt and laid on top of them. Kept your sleeping system nice and warm. I can't help but think that people like that did very much the same technique successfully for thousands of years. And we need to pull out all of our non-combustibles, everything foil and tin and aluminum. There's all of my 3 Mountain House mills and steel wool and 1 chew can lid. These are the remains of other campers who probably more than 15 years since those canisters were isopropane, and it takes a long time for rust like that to occur. So that's 10-15 years of being out here. So this sandbar has been used extensively over the decades, and this is just some reminders of sloppy human use. Someone probably broke one of those cheap-ass lawn chairs and decided to just burn it out here, and there's just not enough fuel source in this country to establish a fire hot enough to burn that to ash. That thing still weighs a pound and a half of just melted plastic and tin foil that animals have chewed on, and I'm going to take that out. But everything else I'm just going to ask the pilot to come by on this next drop here, whenever that might be, this year or next, and grab it. I'm going to leave these rocks where I found them best I can. I'm going to put this coal, protect it from the rain. That charcoal will come in handy for somebody who's trying to make a warming fire after 2 to 3 days of rain like I've had. Oh, those rocks are still hot. Since I've had days to contemplate that ancient hunter who built that warming fire. So if 1 to 2 people made a fire like that at this location, that means that within a day's walk, which is probably 10 to 12 miles, there's a major camp where those peoples were established. They would need a natural choke point to have sustainable resources and not have to travel for miles and miles in open country to find caribou, which is what we are at this exact spot. Anything that direction, we have to go 10 miles of flat country of rolling hills, as opposed to going through a bottleneck of this hill country where it opens back up again. That is my guess, is where there's a base camp, and I'm gonna go find it. Well, here's the stock of my load. I know you're thinking that's a lot of gear for one person and a dog, but it's really not when you consider most people packing a couple big bags, or one big backpack and a couple small bags. I just like to contain mine in smaller items, smaller pockets of gear bags, so that I can stash it all over the boat, distribute my load. Chachi and I eat a few hundred calories of nuts and berries right before we launch. This boosts our metabolism and helps us stay warm while we float. I'm using a 40-pound inflatable boat I designed specifically for this style of hunting. I use watershed dry bags because all others have failed to keep my gear 100% dry. One of the last things I do before launching is ready my rifle, clear the chamber, and stow it into a waterproof gun sack secured to the raft but immediately accessible. That white roll of plastic in a mesh wrap is a homemade backcountry sled. You'll see more of this later. I pyramid my essential bags to form a backrest. Plenty of room for Chachi, and all my gear bags are secured to the raft. And eventually I'll adjust that distribution to account for a meat load. I believe we're finally ready for the second act of the hunt for caribou. It's midday, 44 degrees with high humidity. Feels like 40 degrees, with light scattered rain showers, and the caribou are active. Yeah, it's good to see them crossing in good numbers every 4 or 5 hours.